The King of the Battlefield Chapter 61. The inside was completely restructured. The hallway became much wider and the ceiling was higher. The fishy stench emanating out from everywhere was enough to make anyone's nose crinkle. No need to waste time. First, he had to find the path. He immediately summoned all his undead. Prince and the Avengers, Blazing Spear Soldier, Sorceress of Lightning, Black Sun Warrior and even Heidegger. Walk around and find the path. Looking at the undead and Weung, Baltan and Irene's eyes widened. Heidegger was an undead? Although Heidegger wasn't known as being incredibly strong among humans, his special regenerative powers made fighting him very difficult. But if he was an undead, it meant he had already died. It was the first time they saw him get summoned like this. These two couldn't help but wake up at the skills only a top-ranked monster, the Lich, would have. A single Lich could decimate a moderately sized city. 50 to 100 of the strongest paladins with the strongest light blessings were needed to suppress one. However, the only city that had that many was the holy city Malalan. An appearance of a Lich was enough to make all large organizations tense. He doesn't look like a Lich. This man who suddenly appeared one day. He was a goblin. He had white hair and a horn that was the symbol of a goblin king. They had never heard of a goblin who turned into a Lich. It was even weirder for a Lich to save humans and become their lord. Follow me properly. Weung turned his head and said to the two who were still stuck in their thoughts. They never thought to follow along absent-mindedly. Although the two had followed him here to gain experience and to get stronger, a larger reason was to figure out what kind of person their lord was. Since they didn't know anything. But, did he wait for them? His eyes that flashed dangerously, warning them not to bother him, was the same as before. They thought that he would cold-heartedly work alone, so it was unexpected for him to say something and wait for them. Sorry. We will catch up right away. Baltan and Irene woke up from their thoughts and quickened their pace. Only then did Weung start to move. There wasn't much on the first floor. There were only frog-like murlocs and trap monsters like mimics. They went up to the second floor in a day. Although the dungeon was wide, they were able to find the path because the undead split up to find the way. We rest here today. The second floor. This was the territory of murloc crawlers. Murloc crawlers were large 3M frogs that spit out poisonous fog from their mouths. Only, the poison was meant to paralyze its victims, so it had no effect on the undead. It wasn't very difficult, but Weung went out of his way to find a place to rest. Who? You have incredible stamina. Baltan quietly followed along. Only Irene would try to start a conversation with Weung. She was especially interested in Weung. She would attach a meaning to each of his actions and didn't try to hide her amazement. Her actions were probably in hopes of getting a little bit closer, but unfortunately, the man she was looking at wasn't the type to accept everything. Weung sat down and took out a talisman. Drink it. Thud. Irene caught the water-producing magical item he threw. Kaya. Refreshing. The drink of the gods was here all along. Then she took out a rag from her bag and wiped her sweat. She tried her best to look enchanting while doing so, but Weung didn't pay much attention. On the other hand, Baltan stared at Irene. Irene gave him a "what are you looking at" warning with her clenched fist. Baltan quickly coughed and turned away. Anyways, I've never heard of a symbol turning into a dungeon. It's really an amazing place. There should be some. Yeah, yes. Weung, who was quiet this whole time, answered. And Irene, who heard that, was surprised. She had only asked. She never expected to hear an answer. The floating city, the territory at Cliff's End, the village of Dawn. Their symbols changed into dungeons and are self-sufficient off of it. So there are places like that. Her reaction was like it was the first time she had heard of them. The tips of Weung's eyes slightly twitched. How long has it been since you've arrived in the underworld? 8 months. Heidegger probably didn't kidnap you in a great city. Did you get kidnapped since you left to a different city in those 8 months? Heidegger would most likely kidnap people in remote cities. They were probably kidnapped in a place without any strong people. Irene looked weak. He thought that they would have spent at least 2 years in the underworld before moving to a different city, but they didn't. I have quite an adventurous spirit. Though, I ended up like this. Irene's shoulders drooped. If it was only 8 months, it was possible she didn't know of the cities Myung mentioned, as they weren't commonly discussed places. It was similar to villages where only the people who knew. Lord. How do you know all those places? Irene was excited like a child. It was like he was human. So she asked him, but Myung was silent. He had returned to his previous state. But Irene's eyes became more lively. He had replied once. It meant that he was interested in them. It was the same today. If they didn't rest, they would have been able to go to the 3rd floor. She was positive he had specifically found a resting place for Bolton and herself. Since they really were about to collapse from dehydration. Is he just bad at showing it? Or are his real intentions something else? Although Irene thought that his cold eyes and attitude were unmatched, she believed that he wasn't really a bad person. Gasp. 4th floor. The strong poison spurted out of the cloud-eyed Murloc's mouth landed on Bolton's foot. The strength of the poison was second to none, as it would make one's skin and organs rot with a single touch. Black lines started to spread as the poison dissolved his flesh and entered his bloodstream. Are you okay? Irene dropped down to extract the poison. That moment. Stop. Myung, who had finished off the cloud-eyed Murloc at some point, raised anguish. Slice. And he relentlessly cut Bolton's leg. Grrrk. Bolton screamed in pain. Irene, who saw this, frowned and stared at Myung. Wait. We could have just extracted the poison. Why did you? Looks like you have a lot of time. Myung turned around. And slowly walked away. He was right. They didn't have a lot of time. Irene quickly took out some rags and tightly wrapped them around Bolton's thigh. Bolton and Irene only got this far by helping each other out. Although they weren't a couple, they were closer than anyone. She couldn't lose her friend in a place like this. Irene. What do I do? You're bleeding too much. Go, follow the Lord. Shut up. Before I shut it myself. As there wasn't enough fabric, Irene took off her clothes and wrapped them around his leg. And she actually crammed the leftover fabric to shut Bolton's mouth. We'll be able to leave soon. Just endure for a bit. Irene put Bolton on her back. But Myung's walking pace didn't slow. What a cold-hearted person. At first, she thought he was just bad at expressing himself. But that wasn't the case. He was completely heartless. Looking at how he didn't give her the time to take out the poison and sliced his leg without any hesitation, he wasn't different from anyone else living in the underworld. Irene knew that the one who called themselves strong were all unequally cruel. They only looked at efficiency. Those that were a hindrance, they would toss them aside. She didn't want to be that kind of person. So, she wasn't going to leave Bolton behind. However, it was impossible to leave by herself. Either way, Myung held the answer. Irene clenched her teeth and followed behind Myung. Bolton's heartbeat was slowing down every moment. His cold body drooped. Irene instinctively knew he wouldn't last long like this. If he was a normal person, he would already be dead. He was only able to endure this far because he was transported to the underworld and had strengthened his body. Huff, huff, huff. If she couldn't follow him, that was the end. So Irene became more desperate. Her body was burnt out and her muscle screamed, but she didn't stop moving. Myung quickly cleared the mob of Murlocs. He cleared them without rest. It was like he had become a typhoon. Without realizing it, they were already on the 7th floor. They moved without rest since the 4th floor. Normally they would have returned to the village and took some time to organize themselves. However, he thought that there was no need if he could clear it in one go. This is the final floor. The final form of the Murloc Eater, was here. As there were no sightings of Murlocs stronger than this, he thought the next floor was the last. In the first place, Murlocs weren't very strong monsters. They were to the point where it would be a waste to use the art of death skill on them. They were only difficult because they used poison, but even that wasn't a problem for Muyong. Most poisons would be immediately absorbed by the spirits in Azura's path. And Muyong himself had high resistance to poisons. All the materials Augur used to forcefully make him undergo metamorphosis were extremely poisonous. To the Murlocs, Muyong was their natural enemy. If one could avoid their poisons, they were only slightly large frogs. And once he entered the next floor, a small message appeared. A single sentence. However, the monster that appeared had an incredible presence. Crash! A 10m tall stone statue of a frog broke and the Murloc chief stepped out. It was definitely stronger than all the Murlocs he had killed up until now. However, its actions were awkward. There were places that were still petrified. It looks like I arrived before it was released from its petrification. Muyong grinned. It looked like it didn't expect a challenger to arrive so quickly. For Muyong, this wasn't bad. It meant that he could finish this that much quicker. Soon, a thick poisonous fog spread around him. The movements of the undead became sluggish. Poison shadow. Muyong released all 33 spirits. The crazy spirits of Azura's path. Hi-ah! As soon as the spirits started to go crazy, Muyong's eyes became red as well. The spirits whispered. To slice its flesh and devour its blood. To rip apart the enemy. Kill. Muyong charged forward saying one word. Stomp. Stomp. Slam. Muyong pierced through the poisonous fog and moved with the undead. Blitzkrieg. He dashed forward with only offense in mind. Though it was an awe-inspiring scene, everyone including Muyong was engulfed in their desire for destruction. Crash. The Murloc chief collapsed. Its whole body was sliced apart and it met a pitiful end. But, even Muyong wasn't completely fine. Crack, crack. He forcefully pushed his dislocated joint back into position. He cut off his bruises and extracted his blood. Irene was speechless as she motionlessly looked at Muyong. She would never forget the fight she had seen just now. He charged forward with only attacking in mind. It was something only those who didn't care for their lives could do, and it was beyond intense. Although she had seen a few of the strong show their strength before, she had never seen anyone bring forth as much destructive power as Muyong. Whoosh! Soon, the poisonous fog dissipated and the marble of territory rose from the center of the floor. Muyong slowly approached the marble of territory. And the moment he placed his hand on it. Zing! Behind the marble of territory, a large door appeared. Chapter 62. The place where the relic storage of Murloc King, Murdyudun, was sealed. He had quite the expectation as Murdyudun held the title of a king. And a small door was created beside it. His prediction was correct. These types of dungeons had a gate that led to the entrance when they cleared the final floor. Muyong looked back. You can get out if you pass through the small door. A short speech. On the other hand, you can earn a great reward if you enter the large door. He gave them a choice. The reason why Muyong led the two was simple. It was highly likely for the citizens to be reorganized with those two in the center. The old man saw high potential in the two and sent them to go with Muyong. The dungeon didn't disappear just because you cleared it. He was planning to have them finish exploring the final floor and understand the structure to have them lead others in clearing this dungeon. Exploring the dungeon was a lot more effective in getting stronger than running around the demon god's territory. There was a less chance for any random variables and a chance to earn additional profits. This was the cheapest way to make his citizens stronger. What choice will you make? At the same time, he was curious. Was it because it had only been a year since they entered the underworld? Irene seemed to be full of justice. She was clueless, but it was amazing to see someone with that much upright character in a place where people had already lost their conscience. Also, she maintained her bright personality even when she was used as a slave under Heidegger. That meant it was in her nature. This characteristic was different from a hero's, but Myung knew that heroes were made from the gatherings of these types of people. Then, he could only inwardly laugh. She's different. He would have killed Bolton right away when he was poisoned if it was like when he just returned to the past. Myung saved him and was now giving Irene a chance to choose. It meant that he had changed slightly from how heartless he was in the past. He wouldn't hesitate to kill with a reason, but these two were his citizens. It meant that he could flexible for things he considered his. Murlock's dungeon. It would also hurt his pride if he was to remove them in a place like this just because his baggage increased. Of course, it would be the end if Irene entered the large door to earn a reward. It would reveal that Myung was simply mistaken. It was one of humans' natural instincts to expect a reward after experiencing hardship. He had no plans to scold her. "Lord, I will go through the small door." Without even the slightest hesitation, Irene moved towards the door. Myung seemed quite content. He proved that the image she had shown until now wasn't a lie. Soon, it became quiet on the top floor. Then, one made a choice and Myung was the only one left. And Myung approached the large door. As they passed through the small door, the entrance of the dungeon came into her sight. We really did return. Even though she was out of her mind due to complete exhaustion, she squeezed out the last bit of strength in her to move. Right away, she looked for the old man to ask him to treat Bolton. The only one who had knowledge of medicine was him. However, there was definitely a limit in treatment in a place where they lacked medicinal herbs and facilities. The old man's expression hardened and Irene had reached the peak of her impatience. At that moment, Bolton opened his eyes. "Bolton. Irene. You're awake? Wait a moment. You are being treated right now." Bolton smiled weakly. Bolton knew well of his current body condition. "Irene. Save your words. You're bleeding too much. Lord, don't blame him. He, to save me, did his best." "What do you mean?" "I didn't lose conscience inside the dungeon. I kept watching. For some reason, he gained a bit more strength. It was like when people suddenly gained energy when they were just about to die." Using this time, Bolton continued to talk. "My skin rotted right away when the poison touched me. If he didn't cut it off right away, my skin and organs would have rotted and I would have died a painful death. It was the same meaning when he stopped you from using your lips. If the poison touched you, in an instant, it would have rotted your body. You're saying that he cut it off to save you?" Irene looked at him as if she couldn't believe in what he was saying. However, things shouldn't be left misunderstood. Bolton wanted to at least resolve her misunderstanding. "After I was hurt, we headed for the final floor without a single rest. He knew that a door that led to the entrance would appear when he finished the boss. If it wasn't the case, there was no reason for him to risk getting in danger and rush recklessly." He continued to talk as he swallowed down his saliva. "Even if that wasn't the case, we need to believe in him. If it wasn't for him, we would have all died. You should know yourself as you have also faced Heidegger's tyranny. So, you shouldn't think ill of him. Since we didn't actually provide him with any help." I understand. I understand, so just calm down. Your wound opened. Promise in front of me. That you won't blame him. That you will trust and follow him. I never blamed him from the start. I just thought he was a heartless man. However, I won't even think of him that way. From now on, our Lord is my sky. The sun and the ocean. Okay? Bolton, please. I wanted to hear those words. Bolton smiled as he lied back down. There were a lot of people who were saved by Irene's personality. Bolton was also one of those people. However, he couldn't let her make the worst decision. He was on the edge of his life, but he needed to make things right even if it meant pushing himself. Please, look after us. Bolton prayed. As he entered the storage room, these words appeared. First to enter. Whatever it was, the first normally received the most rewards. Right away, Myung looked around. A smoky scent. Different types of items were squeezed in different places without being organized. It's very different from the storage room of the fire tars. At least, that place was well organized. However, this place, it resembled a garbage dump. Myung slowly looked around and held each and every item. They're all too old. There wasn't anything that wasn't rusted. They had this appearance as it had been thousands of years since the storage was created. And because no one had taken care of them. However, not everything was like that. There were a few items that kept its original shape after a long time. This was here. Among the equipment, less than 10 that were in good condition, and one caught his attention. Myung held a skull-shaped necklace in his hand. Name, skull accessory. Rank, A. Classification, A keepable type. Durability, 1988. Effect, it was an accessory used by the lunatic lich. As of now, there is only one skull, but you can increase the number of skulls to at most 5. To increase the number, you can extract the head of your opponent and use this necklace to automatically minimize it into a skull that will be added to the necklace. Asterisk your stats increase by the number of heads you extort. Asterisk currently, 1 head is equipped. Asterisk head of Jikshaho 1, strength, agility +4. Since it had been so old, its durability was shit but the effects were good. That meant that he could make a skull-shaped accessory using the heads of the people he killed. Depending on the characteristics of the added head, stats and other things would increase. The reason why Heidegger in the past was chased by every large group. So that was it. This skull necklace was one of the equipment the past Heidegger wore. When the Great Calamity started and when Heidegger started to become more active, he searched for heads to add to his necklace. And he collected the heads of the strong members of the 9 guilds and the 5 great clans. Due to the grotesque stories, he was even named Head Hunter. He got it here. He calmly acknowledged it and placed the necklace around his neck. The durability was shit, but it wasn't like there wasn't a way to repair it. Either way, I need to find the 3 pickaxe sack alliance after I catch Headley's cow. It would be time to create an equipment with all the materials he had after he obtained Headley's cow, in the shape of a phoenix. To do this, he thought of the 3 pickaxe sack alliance. The alliance created by the dwarves. As dwarves were beings often used by others here and there, they lived in hiding in a very deep place. Myung already knew of a way to get to that place. There was no one who could catch up to a dwarf when it came to creating things like weapons and armors. With a phoenix, he could create an equipment that was at least an A++ rank. Even broken equipment could be repaired then. Myung continued to move and search for the next reward. And stopped in front of a small pot. It seems to be in good condition. It didn't make sense for most items to be rusted while this pot was in good condition. He could have just passed it, but as it didn't have even the slightest chip, it grabbed his attention. And on top of that, the spirits are reacting. The spirits of Azura Path were reacting to the pot. To be exact, they were reacting to the thing that was inside the pot. Myung placed his hand inside. And took out an ink black marble. This is. No descriptions popped up. Not even when he used the Eye of the Sky skill. So Myung released the spirits. And all the spirits started to attack the marble. Crack. Crack. Finally, the marble cracked and a blue light shined out from within. Murtyu done. Myung frowned. A familiar illusion formed inside the blue light. It was none other than the Murloc king, Murtyudun, who existed in ancient literature. Muyong raised his right hand. The spirits stopped their attack. "Oh ho, do you know me? Murloc king, why were you trapped inside a pot? Was I trapped in there? I don't know. I was talking with Dantalian." "Dantalian? Are you talking about the 71st seat?" "Yeah, that fellow. He said he would tell me the origin of my birth, so I decided listen out of curiosity. To me, the king of the ocean, time is such a dull thing." "How long was he talking about?" Muyong couldn't help but be doubtful. "Didn't the underworld open 100 years ago? Hey? Where did my body go?" "You died. A long time ago." "What? No, now that I think about it, I don't seem to have any physical senses." Murtyudun was shocked after examining his body. "You're not joking, right? If you can't believe me, I'll show you." Muyong went out of the storage. He then showed Murtyudun the Murlocs as he descended the dungeon. Perhaps it was due to the spirit of Murtyudun, but the Murlocs did not attack Muyong. And after checking the condition of all the Murlocs, Murtyudun slammed the ground in regret. "Those things aren't Murlocs. Why have they all become dimwits? As expected, they are different from the past. The Murlocs degraded after you died." "Kah! Dantalian, you bastard! You tricked me!" Murtyudun, who realized this fact all too late, trembled in anger. "Ah! I will grind your body and feed it to the fishes." He died without knowing he died. Although it was partly due to the simple-mindedness of Murtyudun, demon god Dantalian's abilities were incredible as well. You can't listen to his secrets. If you listened to Dantalian's secrets, your physical body would be restrained. It seemed like Murtyudun didn't know that. "What are you going to do? If you decide to go back now, I won't stop you. However, if you follow me, I will help you get revenge on Dantalian." It doesn't seem right to call it following. However, damn! I have no choice. He was furious at the fact that Dantalian tricked him. After thinking for a long time, Murtyudun spoke. "Okay. If I can kill Dantalian, I can do anything." Soon after, Murtyudun subdued the Murlocs around him and went inside Muyong's body. Descendant of the Murlocs activated. The Murlocs slowly start to grow. The growth of Murlocs. They will be good rivals. The citizens and the Murlocs would compete with each other to survive. It seemed like it wouldn't be bad if they both grew and gained a form of rivalry. Soon after, Murtyudun came out of Muyong's body. Unlike the other spirits, Murtyudun was quite free. Azura Path? What is this place? It's filled with crazy fellows. If my instincts are correct, it seems like you should conquer this place first. However, the number of spirits I can handle is too small. I'll increase that number soon. It looks like something will happen when you conquer it. It will definitely strengthen my spirit and become a great help for you as well. Kahaha. It's been a long time since I've stepped on this kind of battlefield. Murtyudun was excited. It seemed like he was slightly affected by the madness of Azura Path. Murtyudun re-entered his body and Muyong exited the dungeon. After he left the dungeon, Muyong stayed a few days in his territory. Baltan was still in critical condition, but Irene's gaze or actions towards Muyong had changed. He didn't really pay attention to it, but you could call it a change. However, he couldn't stay here for too long. Even if this was his territory, he had things to do. Little wish. Muyong took out the cloud-shaped object. The item that allowed 3 small wishes. It was time for him to find the Headley's cow. Chapter 63, Headley's Cow, 2. TL, Yoni. Edited, Mayani, Yoni. He took off a corner of the cloud. To be exact, 1/3 of it. Gulp. He swallowed it without hesitation. Muyong shivered his whole body for a moment. Afterwards, both his eyes were bloodshot and he was bleeding from every pore on his body. Little wish. Whatever it was, if something you wished for came true, it wasn't far from calling it a miracle. That kind of miracle, there was no way it would come true just because you used it. The one who conducted miracles. There was a need for the person who asks for a wish to pay a reasonable price for the wish. The little wish put a burden on the user's body to realize the wish. Similar to the thoughts that would flash through one's mind when they were about to die, the little wish could be said to use one's soul to the fullest. Then, a greeting passed in front of Myung. What do you wish for? A beautiful woman sat on the grass. She was naked and fluttered her pure white wings while she looked at Myung. Every inch of her resembled an angel, but this was simply an illusion. She wasn't real and it was just set up to appear this way. She was a fake angel, an image, which few tens of thousands of priests from the holy city, Malalan, had made. The underworld was a place where only monsters and demons existed. How could these people who called themselves priests picture a true angel when all they've seen were countless demons and never an angel? Therefore, they were people who believed in things they couldn't see and acted only on their beliefs. Myung was one who thought that the ones who gave them strength weren't angels but a different entity altogether. I'm looking for Headley's cow. Your wish will come true. Soon as Myung asked, the greeting quickly died off. He didn't understand why it had to progress the wish this way, but he thought they made it like this to make the process of making a wish seem holy. West. After the greeting died off, a red line which only appeared in Myung's eyes stretched westward. At the same time, Myung's sight widened and a scene passed by. Goblins are migrating towards the west. It was a mass migration. Their numbers seemed to be well above 100,000. They were walking towards some place. Among them, there were quite a few kings with horns. They were all leading their respective tribes towards a single location. Myung remembered the words Augur had said when they first met. Advent of He didn't know what kind of ceremony it was. However, Augur had once told Myung, who he assumed as a goblin, that group of goblins were moving west. It seems like Headley's cow is hiding among them. Why would it be among the goblins out of all the locations? However, he was certain of one thing. All he could see were goblins. No other species were apparent. Therefore, it was most likely that Headley's cow was currently in the shape of a goblin. The reason why Headley's cow is in the shape of a goblin. If you broadened the term, Headley's cow was a fairy. It could be doing this simply for fun, or it could have something to do with the advent of To check, he needed to go. However, he needed to rest for a bit. His whole body felt hot like it was on fire and he felt dizzy and nauseous. Myung leaned against a wall and closed his eyes for a moment. He knew that there would be a side effect but never thought it would affect him so much. I think I'll feel better after a nap. Myung knew his current condition better than anyone else. Since he knew where Headley's cow was and where it was moving towards, he felt it was okay to move after he recovered his body. He heard the cry of a soul that was struggling to keep its life even though it was filled with death. Night. In the shadows of the dark night sky, Myung followed the traces and searched through a desert. Bolton. It was him. He was dying. The fact that he wasn't treated immediately put him in a critical situation. He was holding on with pure willpower. But, Myung was able to instinctively find this place after he woke up from his sleep due to the little wish's side effect. He had already seen countless deaths, so how was it that only this place felt different? Lord! You're barely alive. I'm sorry about my unsightly appearance. His voice was hoarse. A haggard face that could be a corpse's. Bolton awkwardly laughed as he spoke. But it's amazing. I thought the god of death would appear, but you showed up. There is no hope. What's your reason for holding on? Bolton painfully opened his mouth. Because of this child. And he stroked Irene's head, who fell asleep beside him. Considering how she didn't wake even after this commotion, it seemed like she wasn't able to sleep for the past few days. Either way, it would be hard for me to endure past today. At most, half a day. I'm sorry I couldn't be of help. I never had any expectations from the start. I know. To be honest, I was grasping at straws. We are weak and we will never be able to survive the demon god's territory like this. Cough. Cough. Bolton painfully coughed out loud. Then, he got to the point. I was originally planning to leave quietly, but, a favor. Can I ask you for a favor? It's really a simple one. Bolton's eyes were full of desperation. Then, Myung was able to understand the reason why he came to this place. The ruler of death. It was definitely due to his influence. He was able to naturally understand what he needed to do. To ask me for a favor, I need your life. Bolton probably understood what Myung meant by these words. It was because he continuously saw Myung controlling undead. Even so, Bolton nodded his head. I'm gonna die. I'm not afraid of death. Instead, I feel my mind gets clearer as death approaches. That moment. Yes. It was this. After Susie's father, the authority activated for Bolton. He instinctively felt the traces of death and his body automatically moved because he knew it was a golden opportunity to use this authority. Speak. What is it? Would he ask to be saved? Or ask to protect Irene? Bolton forcefully raised his injured body up and kneeled. Use me as Lord's Knight. So that I can protect this place even after I die. It was unexpected. He was aware of his approaching death and volunteered to become an undead. A knight. Myung inwardly mocked him. To be honest, Bolton's physical stats were lousy. He was too lacking to become a sword that could protect Myung, and he probably already knew this. To become a knight was just an excuse, and what he truly wanted was to be allowed to protect this territory. Bolton wanted to protect the people left behind even like this. A useless sacrifice. I thought that myself. That the underworld was a malicious place where only the selfish survive and the good die. Even now, my thoughts haven't changed. But... Bolton clenched his teeth. We can't just sit here and accept it. I understood that it had to start with myself when I came to this place. To be exact, it was Irene who showed me this. Do you believe your death will change this place? Yes. He didn't have a slightest hesitation. It was arrogance. But it was worth complimenting the fact he wanted to stand up for himself without hiding behind others. In the very least, he couldn't mock that. Myung turned his body. When the sun rises, you will be born again. Like a prophecy, he spoke those words before he left. And the next day, Bolton, the guardian of a territory, was born. Level, 101. Type, Guardian Knight. Strength 112, 92 plus 20, Agility 115, 95 plus 20, Stamina 160, 140 plus 20. Intelligence 94, 74 plus 20, Wisdom 92, 72 plus 20, Indomitable 80, 60 plus 20. Plus Guardian of the Territory, within the designated territory, all stats plus 20. Plus Cry of the Guardian, within the territory, toughness of allies increases slightly. Plus Strengthening Potential, you will become stronger when you fight to protect. Plus High Conservation Rate, high autonomous will. Myung newly reanimated the dead Bolton and placed the restraints of the Guardian of the Territory on him. He was able to receive an art score of 84 as his story was good and because of the power of authority. Even though he was strengthened, his stats were only at this level because he wasn't good material, but even this was amazing. There was also no way for undead Bolton to betray him. He thought that Bolton would do well in protecting this place as his memories were still intact. Strengthening potential and high autonomous will. And even though he was now an undead, he had the two things that were both hard to obtain. This was the power of authority. Normally, even if he was strengthened, since he was weaker than Heidegger, it would be a waste to make him the guardian of the territory, as there could only be one per territory. However, the story would change if he could think on his own and grow. Not only that, but he was able to recover his whole body, even his foot had regenerated. He had no problem moving. Bolton will replace me as a substitute lord for a while, Myung announced quietly. Everyone here trusted Bolton. And just in case, he also set the prince and the Avengers here. It would be helpful if few tens of undead were there. Bolton has been born again as my knight. While I'm gone, follow Bolton and develop the dungeon and the surroundings. I will follow your order. The very first to respond was Bolton. Amazingly, he didn't speak awkwardly. Even his eyes shined as if he was still alive. Lord, may I ask where you are going? The old man couldn't hide his nervousness and asked. Myung looked towards the red line in the air and gave a short reply. I'm going to the Soul Mountains. The Soul Mountains. It was the place where the goblins were conducting their ceremony. And Headley's cow was well hidden in that place. Myung was planning to join in as the hunter. The red line pointed towards the west. However, as time passed, it became fainter. Did I arrive there already? Over 100,000 were in a line. It seemed like everyone had already arrived at the destination. In fact, it had been quite a while since he had first heard about the goblins' movements from Augur. There is a need for the Hell Horse. Myung knitted his brows. It was a bit expected, but he wasn't able to sense the Hell Horse at all. It seemed like the Hell Horse stayed at the location when he used the long-distance teleportation magical item. However, the Hell Horse's mobility might be needed to catch the Headley's cow. As a Hell Horse, it would definitely be able to pressure Headley's cow, who turned into a phoenix. I guess I need to try it out first. He had no choice. He needed to try on his own even without the Hell Horse's help. Myung diligently moved towards the west. The huge Soul Mountains. Over 100,000 goblins were gathered. Aum. Ahom. Aum. Ahom. Aum. Ahom. Aum. Ahom. Thump. 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 They sang while they stomped the ground. It was so loud that it sounded out all over the mountains. Few thousands of tribes were gathered and different types of goblins were here. If you have white hair and a horn, aren't you an ice goblin king? Why are you here on the fire goblin's side? Get lost. I'm letting you off easy since we're in the middle of the advent of Someone grabbed Myung's shoulder. It was a goblin king with his blazing red hair. An enormous figure. The ice goblins and the fire goblins were on bad terms. Where are the ice goblins gathered? Ha, so there are even kings as foolish as you running around. It's that way. Thank you. What? He was confused as if he didn't expect to hear thanks. But Myung didn't care and diligently headed towards the location the fire goblin pointed. Among these goblins, there is Headley's cow. Myung was certain. He didn't know what the ceremony of advent of for, but it seemed to be out of the ordinary. The land and magic were shaking. Just by being nearby, he felt like his soul could be sucked in. It was the reason why only goblins were here in this wide mountain range. And it didn't seem like Headley's cow would have joined this kind of ceremony for fun. There must be something it wanted to accomplish through the advent of Wait for me. Who, among the over 100,000 goblins, could be Headley's cow? Myung's eyes became serious. Chapter 64. Dakibus were monsters ranked somewhere in between low and mid-rank. Although they weren't generally strong, there were certain tribes that definitely stood out among them. This was especially true for Dakibus with horns, who were known as kings. And depending on their characteristic, their appearance differed. You could differentiate them simply by looking at their hair color. For example, Ice Dakibus had white hair like Myung. Myung found the area where the Ice Dakibus were gathered. The numbers are small. At most, maybe 5,000 Dakibus. They only had half the numbers of others. Ahum. 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 As if they had already practiced the chant, all the Dakibas were shouting in unison. When Weong approached them, unlike before, no one stopped him. Except, there were some groups that looked at him in wonder. Why did he come alone? Is he a wandering king? Usually, Dakibi kings had few tens to few hundreds of Dakibas in their group. Weong couldn't help but stand out as he was alone. However, there were no enemies. If anything, it was the opposite. Since the number of ice Dakibas was small in number, they would be glad to increase their number even by one. Weong pondered for a moment. Advent of Advent meant that he would return. There was a high possibility that was a Dakibi with an important status. First, he needed to understand this ceremony. That way it would be possible to search for Headley's cow at this place without raising any suspicions. Have you seen before? The horned Dakibi right next to him gave him a questioning look and spoke. Um's position was vacant for 1,000 years. Weong inwardly nodded his head. Didn't mean a figure but a position. But for 1,000 years. It seemed like they were planning to decide their true leader at this place. He dug a bit deeper. Then, who do you think will take this position from this ceremony? Well, of course, it's going to be Sahun. He's the true ruler who rules over 3,000 ice Dakibas. Did you come here after living near the border? Sahun. Weong slightly turned his gaze. There was a Dakibi who stood out more than the rest. A Dakibi whose skin was completely blue was receiving many gazes of confidence from others. He looks more like a Yaksa than a Dakibi. Yaksa. They were species known as Duoxini which were, in reality, evolved Dakibas. Weong only heard of them before, this was his first time seeing one. And there were at least 5 more Duoxini present. Weong retracted his gaze and answered coolly. You're right. That's why I don't know much about this ceremony. The Dakibi clicked his tongue. Fortunately, he wasn't suspicious any longer and continued to speak. A black star will fall from the sky and a trial will start and every Dakibi will be able to challenge the position of However, this time, things are going to be difficult as there is Sahun. A completely boastful expression. That meant that he had that much confidence in Sahun. A black star was going to fall from the sky. He couldn't imagine it very well. However, it seemed like they were being non-aggressive until the black star fell. He was now able to understand why the fire Dakibi was completely furious. Thank you for your explanation. My name is Weong. I'm Jaeon. Jaeon, the one that leads the Freezing Land tribe. It seems like you're just a wandering king, don't do anything pointless and it would best for you to help Sahun. The two held hands. However, Weong didn't really pay attention to Jaeon's words. If it's a Duoxini, he would have already led many tribes for a long time. So, Headley's cow wouldn't have turned into a Duoxini. It must be one of the Dakibas who had just joined. First, he removed Sahun and other Duoxini from his radar. However, he couldn't easily ask this part. If he was unlucky, Headley's cow might become aware that someone was searching for it. The worst conclusion. A Dakibi who joined recently. A Duoxini would know. Weong's eyes clouded. Although Duoxinis were now removed from his list of suspicions, on the other hand, Duoxinis would know which Dakibas recently joined and followed them. The most certain way was to ask them. However, he couldn't do that now. He stood out too much and if he made the wrong move, he could seem suspicious. After the trial starts, it seemed better to approach them at a better timing. The ceremony continued for few days. The energy within the Soul Mountains became thicker each day and during this time, everyone focused on singing the Aum song. Exactly after 7 days since Weong joined them. Thump! From the sky, the hum fell. Hum! The black star which brought the trial. A device to find out who the true was. However, there wasn't just one There were two black stars that fell from the sky. It's strange. It said in the prophecy that only one would fall. Jaeon tilted his head. A prophecy can't always be completely correct. Myung was certain. There were many times when these things called prophecies were very vague. No, there were more times when they were wrong. This was because prophecies were received through descent of God. It literally meant that God came down upon a living being and it was impossible for that living being to listen properly. There was a high chance that through this process, information became distorted or bloated up. Either way, it has now started. Jaeon led his 50 tribe members and joined them. Of course, Sehun the Duoxini stood in the very front. It was the same for other types of Dakibus. Two stars that fell in the middle of the mountains. However, it was more precise to call it a meteor than a star. Although it was interesting that there was no real impact from the meteors, the two meteors were gathered at the top of a mountain. And there was a large gap between the two meteors. Myung, what are you going to do? To be honest, wandering kings are free. We can't force you. Since he had no group to lead, he also had no responsibilities. However, Myung looked a bit confident. Let's follow. Good, Myung. Then, follow me. You are a guest of our freezing land tribe. Even though he said to follow him, it was the same as following Sehun. At the very front, leaders including Sehun discussed. And depending on their choice, they entered through the gap of the hums. It was the same for Myung and messages appeared right as he entered. Endless battlefield. Myung's eyebrows twitched. There weren't many entrances to the endless battlefield. It hadn't been long but it was the second time he had entered. First, it was through the huge marble the fire tars had. And now it was through the black stars the Dakibus called hums. Ha! He looked at his left shoulder. The number 18 was written on it. It meant that he had cleared the 18th wave before and the number would change when he produced a new record. So the trial of hum meant the endless battlefield. He couldn't be certain. 2 hums had fallen onto the ground. The other one could be an entirely different trial. But was it possible for this many people to enter the endless battlefield? Myung looked around. A number a bit over 30,000. It was the final number of Dakibus who decided to enter here. It was small compared to the total number but a number that couldn't be considered small were gathered here. However, from Myung's understanding, normal endless battlefields could only be entered by one person at a time. Even though it's different, the content is the same. He never heard of an endless battlefield where a great number could enter at once. It seemed to be a special version of the endless battlefield. However, the very context of the endless battlefield didn't change. Though I have heard that this was a place where you fight until you die. Just what is this place? As Jaeon mumbled to himself in confusion, Myung replied in a passing tone. Soon, they will come out. Myung, do you know something? They're out. A vast plain. From a distance, 2,500 goblins were approaching. And Sehun was the first to run towards the 2,500 goblins. Clash! He jumped up high and charged towards the middle of the group of goblins. Afterwards, the ground started to shake as he struck the ground. Duoxini. It was the strength only an evolved Dakibi would have. For the trial of hum to be merely killing goblins. Jaeon spoke as if he was greatly disappointed. It seemed like he had some kind of fantasy about the black star, hum. But, as he wasn't a human with a status viewer, he wasn't able to read the messages. All the Dakibus were unable to see the information about the trial that Myung had seen. Therefore, Myung gave them advice. This is not the end. Since he had already entered, he needed to see it to the end. If it was 30,000 Dakibus, he should be able to pass the 18th wave. To do this, he couldn't let his guard down. Humph, even if you say so, they are mere goblins. Even if more appeared, they are no match for us. Either way, let's move Muyong. We can't let Sahan clear them all. In number and strength, Dakibus completely overpowered them. 2,500 goblins died in less than 20 minutes. At the same time, the next wave started. This isn't the end. Jaeon, who was intoxicated with a feeling of victory, blinked his eyes. Not just Jaeon. Even if it was lousy, a battlefield was still a battlefield. Most of the Dakibus were intoxicated with the feeling of victory. Then, they were dumbfounded as they noticed other monsters approaching. It didn't end. What? This battlefield doesn't end. How many waves they clear, that wasn't important. Muyong remembered the words that appeared when he first entered this place. Only 350 can leave here alive. It was about 1% of the total number of Dakibus who entered. That meant, they had to continue to battle until there were only 350 left. Muyong looked towards the front. They entered with the fire Dakibus and they numbered around 10,000. Like Sahan, the one leading them was also a Duoxini. Unless they were simply clearing the battlefield, they will have to bump into each other. When they realized the nature of this battlefield, they would inevitably bump into each other. The ice Dakibus and the fire Dakibus were on bad terms. Even more, since they were greater in numbers, it was obvious who was going to attack first. I need to prepare. Muyong had strong suspicions that Headley's cow would be with the fire Dakibus. Even the one who took the position as Uma 1,000 years ago was also a fire Dakibi. The first time was hard, but the second time would be easier. They would have more information than others. In reality, unlike the other Dakibus, the fire Dakibus weren't greatly swayed. It meant that they were expecting this to a certain degree. If it was aiming for something, it would obviously side with the fire Dakibus. That was why Muyong decided to silently prepare. Either way, this battlefield wouldn't end in just a few days. There was enough time to slowly set traps. Muyong quietly walked towards a dead Dakibi. All goblins start off as spirits. Dakibus were normally monsters who started off as spirits. This could be seen by how they normally followed the 5 elements and used powers of the land. And the relationship with spirits and specters were quite close. Since there were times you called corrupted spirits, specters. Then he could definitely turn them into specters and use them. Get up. 6 paths. Among them, he opened a Jura path and extracted the spirit. Spirits started to float above the corpses of the dead Dakibus and were sucked in a Jura path, one after the other. And when Muyong saw this, the tips of his lips started to wiggle. Chapter 65, Second Class, 1. TL, Yoni. Edited, Mayani, Yoni. The number of specters quickly increased, which meant that many Dakibus were dying. The Dakibus were already facing the 8th wave. However, Muyong still didn't partake in the battle. The spirit will completely separate from the bodies of the dead Dakibus after some time passes. He couldn't make the spirits into specters after the spirits have completely left the body. It took 2 days to reach the 8th wave and Muyong already had 1,000 specters. This place was simply a gold mine for Muyong. Swaya. The spirits came out of the bodies of dead Dakibus and instantly went into Muyong's body. Azura Path. The conquest rate of crazy specters was continuously increasing in the process. The conquest rate steeply increased as the number of specters increased. Still not enough. I need more specters. Murloc King Murtyudun was excited to go into battle leading specters. In a state completely filled with excitement, he kept pestering Muyong. If he continued like this, the conquest of Azura Path didn't seem far away. Not even one of the 6 worlds is easy. Azura Path, Hell Path, Preta Path, Animal Path, Human Path, and Deva Path. Muyong had seen a glimpse of each one. They were filled with all sorts of horrors and he felt like whoever conquered those places would become a god. At least, that was how Muyong felt when he looked at Azura Path. These burning glares. There were a few who glared at Muyong for not participating in the fight and wandering around dead Dakibus. Not a lot, but it was important to note that he was getting their attention. I need to change my method. If he was to openly make undead on top of this, it would be enough for him to become an enemy of all. All the Dakibus would instantly acknowledge Muyong as their enemy and attack him. No matter how great Muyong was, he wasn't able to avoid the over 30,000 Dakibus in this limited area. There was too big of a risk, and therefore he needed to secretly make them into undead. Clap. Left with no choice, Muyong changed his method. He placed his hands together as if he was in praying. It sort of seemed like he was praying for the dead. Stay still. He picked out the still intact corpses out of the spiritless bunch and reanimated them into undead. But he didn't allow them to move. Since, in a battlefield that continues endlessly, he had no time to waste in organizing them. Fight and die, then you will become an undead. When he turned 200 Dakibus into undeads, a change occurred. Level, 60. Type, Ghoul. Strength 66, Agility 55. Stamina 66, Intelligence 66. Wisdom 65. Like the Prince and the Avengers, it seemed like they were recognized as one. Muyong quickly made a talisman. As he summoned the Dakibus into a talisman, the corpses turned undead magically disappeared. They were all transported into the talisman. Did I see it wrong? I think the corpses disappeared. Didn't you see how the corpses of monsters that spawned in this trial disappear? It's probably a characteristic of this place. Muyong nodded after hearing their conversation. The Dakibus who weren't familiar with talismans found the disappearing corpses strange, but only thought of it as a characteristic of the endless battlefield. It was better this way. Muyong was only able to make 50 to 100 undead in a day, but through their misunderstanding, he was able to speed things up. But, what is that Dakibi doing? Is he trying to cleanse their spirits? He's probably just scared. This is why Ice Dakibus. Of course, there were some Dakibus who didn't think well of Muyong. They clicked their tongues and looked at Muyong with disdain. Since he never participated in the battle, everyone branded him as a coward. However, he didn't care. He didn't fall for their shabby provocations. It was enough to participate in combat near the end of the battle. For now, he needed to concentrate on making undead and specters. I am moving too fast. Muyong didn't forget to observe the situation of the battlefield continuously. Already the 10th wave. A boss-level monster appeared. About 2,000 Dakibus died by the time they faced the 10th wave. It was because they didn't know any tricks and were competing against each other. If they continued like this, they would easily clear the 20th wave, but anything beyond that seemed unlikely. Muyong, you're like a chief priest. At that moment, the king of Freezing Land tribe approached Muyong. He had injured his arm. Chief priest. Even the one who prophesied the advent of was the chief priest. He works with souls and has the right to enter the world of the universe. Like what you're doing now, his role was also to pray for the dead. However, Jaeon let out a deep breath and continued to speak. Right now, we don't need a chief priest. It's time to fight on the front lines. Although you are a wandering king, if you, a king, just stand by, we, the Ice Dakibus, will completely lose face. It seemed like he couldn't take Muyong's strange behavior anymore and had come to give him a word of advice. As they were in a place with the fire Dakibus, they took care in how they looked to others. However, Muyong silently continued to do what he was doing. Time was too precious to care about what other Dakibus thought. Not all kings are strong. Muyong, I understand if you're chief priest class of Dakibi and isn't used to fighting. At least just act like you're fighting. I, the king of the Freezing Land, Jaeon, will be responsible for your safety. You don't have to be responsible for my safety. Muyong tapped his waist one time. He shook anguish that was attached to his waist and showed off. Then, Jaeon shook his head from side to side. Sehun is currently fighting alone and there are too many casualties. If even our prestige dies off, then everything will go to the fire Dakibus. Just leave one alone. If you kill all the enemy, the next wave starts. On the other hand, if you leave even one alive then you could gain time to rest. If they gain time to rest then they could reduce the number of casualties. There was a need to walk the safest path as the ice Dakibus were lacking in number. Jaeon widened his eyes and asked again. Is that true? What do I earn from lying to you? Myung gave off an uncaring attitude. Just an advice. To accept it or not was their choice. That's true. I will try telling Sehun. Once again, Jaeon quickly joined the battle. And Myung also started to pray again. He really is an odd one. What's the point in paying attention to that sort of coward Dakibi? But, the enemies who appeared this time don't seem easy. I think we need to quickly go and join up with the others. The attention Myung received quickly died off as well. Clap. The number of spirits rose and a stack of undead was made. Myung's advice wasn't accepted in the end. It couldn't be helped. If there were only ice Dakibus, it might have been different, but they were with the long-time rivals, the fire Dakibus. If they tried to leave one monster alive, they wouldn't allow it. Instead, they would speed up the battle to push them to their limits. It was the same as unknowingly walking on the path to self-destruction by only immersing yourself in the little things. Moo! The gigantic monsters cried. To the Dakibus, these monsters with 2 feet and a bull's head were like their natural predators. They had naturally high resistance to magic and their tough hide made most attacks ineffective. The only ones that could face the Minotaurs were the Dakibi kings and Duoxini. Thump! Thump! Thwoomp! The Duoxini, the ruler of the ice Dakibus, Sehun showed destructive power. Whatever his fists touched would freeze and shatter. His strength was also remarkable and even the Minotaurs were taken back. However, Sehun was slowly getting exhausted. The other Dakibus couldn't notice but his insides were slowly breaking down. Arlo. Sehun moved his gaze. Arlo, the ruler of fire Dakibus. Sehun couldn't act weak while that guy was still alive. Like Sehun, he evolved into a Duoxini from a Dakibi. The two were on bad terms for a long time. They fought countless times but not once was there a clear outcome. Did it make sense to have 100 fights with 100 draws? However, it couldn't be helped. They were equally powerful. As it was obvious that if one died the other would be in a near-death state, their fights always ended up as a draw. I will beat you this time. However, this time, it would be different. To win, Sehun was overexerting himself. If he was overexerting himself, it meant that Arlo was also overexerting himself. Although Arlo might appear to be fine, he thought that he was having a hard time. However, after continuously fighting the Minotaurs, he found that that wasn't the case. He isn't getting tired. On the other hand, Sehun was exhausted. How was this possible? Are the fire Dakibus this strong? By then, Sehun realized something strange. The fire Dakibus were strengthening each other. To be exact, they were sharing each other's stamina. Of course, Arlo wasn't exhausted. Since if he was, he could just take the stamina of another Dakibi. It was a skill they didn't normally have. He didn't know where they learned that kind of skill but, it couldn't be said that Arlo wasn't a wicked ruler. Sehun frowned after seeing the enemies who have just appeared. Orc Lord and Orc Warkifs. They weren't easy opponents. Especially the Orc Lord who was similar to Duoxinis in that they exceeded the strength of regular orcs. The fire Dakibus were the first to act triumphantly. Sehun ground his teeth. If he lost the lead, it was like he was giving up the position as was someone only those who stacked meritorious deeds acknowledged by everyone could become. I can't just stay here like this. Sehun moved. Blaze. Clash. The Orc Lord sliced the flames. The ruler of the fire Dakibi, Arlo, shot. It swung its huge great sword indiscriminately as it pushed forward. Even if it was Arlo, against an Orc Lord, 1 vs 1 was difficult. A few hundred fire Dakibas quickly gathered around and shot flames, but with a single swing of its sword, a gust of wind blew out the flames. All the fire Dakibas were thrown into disarray. Arlo wasn't any different. Closh! Thump! Then, a huge ice mass created in the sky smashed onto the Orc Lord. It was a great shot made by Sahun. Swack! However, Orc Lord was even able to split that ice block in half. He thought it would definitely hit. However, the opponent who appeared before them wasn't any ordinary Orc Lord. Sword Ghost. It had a title of the Ghost of the Sword. It meant that it was well versed in swordsmanship. Without any time for the Dakibas to reorganize, the Orc Lord and the Orc Warkifs pushed towards them. Their force overwhelmed the few tens of thousands of Dakibas. He can't see. Then some Ice Dakibi king approached and stood beside Sahun. Sahun tilted his head and looked at the Dakibi who approached him. If you're going to aim, aim both sides at the same time. If we work together with the Duaxini who leads the fire Dakibas, we could win. All Ice Dakibas showed deep respect towards Sahun. However, the Dakibi in front of him didn't appear to show any signs of it. He was like emotionlessness itself. Then, Sahun could only be surprised for a moment. When did he come next me? He wasn't able to notice his existence until he came right next to him. Even if he was preoccupied, it wasn't something that was possible. Who is this guy? Chapter 66. Sahun momentarily was lost for words, but that was all. The Orc Lord continued to move. If he wasted more time, it would only lead to more destruction. That was why he had to make a decision. If he was going to trust in the words of the Dakibi in front of him and change his method of fighting, his ego would take a hit, but if they were to ask the ruler of the fire Dakibas Arlo for cooperation, he might agree to it. However, to do this, he needed to be certain. Was the Orc Lord really blind? From his reaction, that certainly didn't seem to be the case. However, for some odd reason, he couldn't just ignore this Dakibi's words. There weren't many Dakibas who had such a large presence. Duaxinis, who were evolved Dakibas, were able to see the nature of a being. They were able to differentiate between a truth and a lie to a certain degree. I can't see anything nor feel anything. Is he truly even a Dakibi? However, he had never experienced someone like him before. This guy's nature was emptiness itself. He was like a speck of dust that would come and disappear like the wind. However, his presence couldn't be compared to a speck of dust. All the words he said seemed to be truths. It was contradictory. However, that was the truth. What's your name? Myung. As expected, it was a name of a Dakibi king he had never heard of. Sahun started to move again. He breathed heavily as his whole body moved up and down. If that Dakibi was telling the truth, he would be greatly recognized for his actions, while if he wasn't, he would suffer hell for deceiving him. That name, I'll remember it. You don't have to remember it. Sahun's eyes stiffened. For him to remember an Ice Dakibi's name was like infinite honor. He was the ruler of Ice Dakibas and was a Warkif currently competing for the position. However, Myung spoke indifferently as if didn't care about such things. From now on, I will let you know through Jaeon. Then, without any hesitation, he turned his back. What kind of Dakibi is he? He was simply being disrespectful. From what he could remember, he was never treated this way even from the fire Dakibas he wasn't on good terms with. What was more, he never thought he could experience this kind of feeling from the same type of Dakibi. He could feel that the Dakibi didn't want to be exposed. Sahun was a bit taken back by his attitude, but he clicked his tongue and shook his head. There wasn't enough time. Swa-a-a-a-a-a. A long spear made of ice formed above Sahun's right hand side. The side you say. Thump. Sahun stomped on the ground and quickly attacked the side of Orc Lord. From afar, Muyeong watched the head of the Orc Lord soar. The ruler of Ice Dakibus, Sahun. Fortunately, the one to finish it off was him. He had at least saved face. Sahun. 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 Aum. Ahom. Aum. Ahom. The Ice Dakibus were celebrating. The process didn't matter, only the outcome was everything in this world. Orc Lord's neck was slain by Sahun, and it was safe to say that most of the credit belonged to Sahun. It's not the time yet to step out onto the front lines. From a step back, Muyeong observed them. As they passed the 20th wave, there shouldn't be any major obstacles for at least a few more waves. And Muyeong still had more things to do. When he decides to join the front lines, he needed to give up this gold mine. Even more, there was a chance for Headley's cow to become suspicious of Muyeong. Even the advice he gave Sahun was done with a bit of risk. Currently, he didn't give any room for doubts, but if this happened continuously, it could become harmful. 5 candidates. Of course, Muyeong wasn't just making undead and specters. He searched for Headley's cow with his keen eyes. And from the fire Dakibus, he found 5 who were the most suspicious. One of the candidates was a Dakibi king who recently joined and didn't have a tribe like Muyeong and acted differently from normal Dakibus. To be exact, he figured this out by carefully observing the ruler of the fire Dakibus, Arlo, but if Headley's cow was here, it had to be one of those Dakibus. Muyeong thought so himself. Muyeong. Listen. Sahun said that he appreciates my service. It's probably because I fought so well on the front lines. Jaeon approached Muyeong as the excitement slowly died off. It was to boast. Congrats. Muyeong mindlessly congratulated him. It wasn't bad to converse with him, as he would be the one who would pass on the messages to Sahun. As Muyeong replied, Jaeon nodded his head and held his nose in the air. Muyeong, if you fight on the front lines, you can also earn this kind of honor. I don't have any greed in that sort of thing. Tisk tisk. You can only say that because you came from the remote region and don't know the greatness of Sahun. If you continue to watch Sahun, you will naturally gain respect for him. He was Sahun's fan through and through. It seemed like Sahun realized how Muyeong didn't want to be noticed and took measures like this. It was good that he was quick-witted. Muyeong stopped paying attention to Jaeon. 2,000 specters were made. It was a steep pace. He had already made over 500 undead. Normally, he didn't really enjoy increasing his numbers like this. A truly strong person could do the work of a few thousand and even a few 10,000. It meant that it was much more effective to concentrate on just one. However, Muyeong had the wicked belt that strengthened every undead, and this endless battlefield was a place where he could only fight with the numbers he had. If he was to use the dead once more, then his military strength would double. Of course, it wouldn't be simple as his calculations, but either way, he believed it wasn't bad to focus on quantity, as these situations were very rare. I could probably dominate over half of Azura Path. Murloc King Murtyudun was leading 2,000 specters and was trying to conquer Azura Path. Conquest rate 22%. And every time the conquest rate increased, something changed inside Muyeong. He couldn't be certain what that was, but he felt like he would know when it reached a certain point. Honestly, think about it. It would be too late to regret it when Sahun gets the position, Muyeong. As Muyeong didn't show much interest, Jaeon gave him a small advice before he leaving. It was because the next wave had started. It's not too late to move after I become certain who the Headley's cow is. The moment he joined the front lines, his opportunity to look around would disappear. Muyeong quietly watched the 5 candidates as he moved. The situation changed. To be exact, you could say Sahun accepted Muyeong's advice. After cutting off the Orc Lord's head, Sahun's influence became stronger, and due to this, he was able to leave a monster alive to delay the start of the next wave. The fire Dakibus ground their teeth. However, the difference between them shortened as time passed. Sahun was getting exhausted and on the other hand, Arlo wasn't. The rate of contribution. Both Duoxines only cared about the rate of contribution. The one with the higher rate of contribution would be able to take the position of With that in mind, Muyeong's current rate of contribution was very close to 0%. The rate of contribution is meaningless in the lower waves. However, Muyeong didn't care. There were cases where one large contribution in a higher level was better than contributions for 10 low levels. Therefore, it was time to grow his strength and wait for an opportunity for now. And when they were faced with the 25th wave, a small change occurred for Muyeong. As he got closer to 50%, the shape of his pupils changed as they became redder. At first, he didn't know. However, he happened to look at his reflection through a sword of one of the corpses and saw this change. That he was changing. And that Azura path was in the center of that change. Then, Murtyudun's soul popped out from inside Muyeong's body. Unlike before, he was wearing a long golden armor and a helmet. Even though I'm almighty, there is a limit in conquering with these lousy specters. To win against the one with 2 horns, there is no answer by just increasing the numbers. Who is the one with 2 horns? He's the one who reigns Azura path. He has a similar appearance to you but slightly different. He is stronger than you and darker. For some reason, he is currently sealed but he's been reacting as I've continued to conquer. Muyeong knitted his brows. The one that reigned over Azura path had the same appearance as him. The fact that he had 2 horns was different but he was sealed. Then you can't conquer any further. However, he was about to hit 50%. Muyeong's instincts cried out. That if he was to fill the rest of the 2%, a real change will occur. Murtyudun pondered for a moment before he shook his head. I think a bit more is possible. However, you shouldn't be greedy. There is a chance you will lose even the parts I've conquered when that guy awakens. Now, we need stronger specters than to increase in numbers. Murtyudun was clear on what he wanted to say. That even if he was to increase the number of Dakibi specters, they had reached their limit. Muyeong was convinced. And the world flipped around. The position of the dead and the living had changed. The living didn't care but the dead were all looking at Muyeong. The ones who were here from the past. Not just Dakibus but he could even see the pre-existing dead souls. There were also Duoxines like Sahun and Arlo. Ancestors. The ones who died here without being able to become the So it was like this. The eye of Azura looked at the world of the dead. It allowed him to stand on the boundary. However, the strong existences above Duoxines ignored Muyeong. It seems like it's because my spectre creating ability is low. If he could collect the pre-existing souls, he no longer had a reason to collect the Dakibus. However, to take control of all these existences, he needed a stronger spectre creating ability. If he could control strong spirits, he could add them to Azura path and use them for many things as well. For instance, Muyeong held a Minotaur's soul in one hand. Like this. Only one is possible right now. He couldn't overlap multiple spirits. However, there was definite room for improvement. Muyeong smiled in satisfaction. As expected, this place was a gold mine for Muyeong. Asterisk. Thump. Thump. The Dakibus could only be petrified by the appearance of the green giants. Coming this far, about half of the Dakibus had died. But, the mood wasn't bad. However, the tension doubled when the ogres appeared. Ogres were high-rank monsters. They were a bit below the fire tars but when simply looking at their destructiveness, they were above the fire tars. They were the worst enemies for the Dakibus. It was the same for Duoxines. Sahun was completely exhausted and Arlo was at his limit fighting just 1 or 2 ogres. Even if they were to push with their numbers, they couldn't hold back all 30 ogres. Qua. Aak. Thump. Crash. Few tens of Dakibus lives died every time the ogres moved. They showed that much overwhelming power. All the Dakibus clenched their teeth. It was the same for Sahun. Sahun's entire body was covered in blood. He was barely able to hold back an ogre, but he didn't know how long he would last. If it's like this. Sahun made a hopeless expression as he pushed his disjointed shoulder back into the socket. If he died now, contributions and everything became meaningless. Just like that, the ruler of the fire Dakibus, Arlo, would win. Move. It was when Sahun was getting ready to fight back. Before he realized, Muyong stood beside him. However, Sahun couldn't treat Muyong as he did in the past. What they? Sahun's eyes widened. Behind Muyong, few thousands of black specters showed their faces. It was like a dark storm. Chapter 67, Second Class, 3. TL, Yoni. Edited, Yoni, Mayanai. As he stepped forward, the specters scattered and ate up an ogre. He was able to physically and spiritually restrain them with specters. Kwa-a-a-a-a-a-a. The ogre screamed loudly. Swish. Muyong took out anguish and shot straight towards it. However, the ogre was able to remove the restraints shortly after. Clash. As if he knew it would happen, Muyong kicked the floor. Instantly, he climbed up the ogre's arm and immediately slashed at its shoulder. However, the wound wasn't deep. The specters moved again. Few thousand specters held the ogre's ankles. However, ogres were monsters with very high resistance. In an instant, it broke free from the specters. It's not like there was no way to hold back an ogre, but it was amazing for the low-rank specters to hold back an ogre even for a moment. Even more, the ogres were high-rank monsters. Muyong couldn't do it alone, but if he summoned all his undead, he might be able to handle one. But, besides the original undead, there were about 1,000 Dakibus in waiting, but he couldn't just carelessly summon them. The undead are my last resort. The undead were going to play an important role in catching Headley's cow. Muyong was successful in reducing the candidates for Headley's cow to 2. There were 5 recently joined Dakibi kings who received the trust of Arlo the Duoxini and initiated some changes. While he was observing them, he awakened the eye of Azura. Muyong was now able to contact the world of the dead. However, the dead weren't easily able to approach 2 of the 5 suspects. Muyong already knew that strong fairies could restrict the movements of spiritual beings. That meant that one of the 2 Dakibus was most likely Headley's cow. 2 is enough. If there were only 2 candidates, he could keep an eye on them and would even have the time to capture them in the case of an emergency. And now Muyong was working to reduce the candidates down to 1. What Headley's cow wanted was to be victorious in the endless battlefield. He didn't know why, but for some reason it was helping the fire Dakibus and providing them with support. However, if it was faced with danger, it would have no choice but to show its true form. To do this, it was best to first make the fire Dakibus experience danger, and to balance the power, it was best for him to help Sahun. Ogres were thorough hunters. They would attack the weakest first. And he clearly saw through their intentions as they targeted the lesser-numbered ice Dakibus first. However, the situation would reverse once Muyong added his strength. Using shadow teleportation, Muyong instantly moved to Sahun's side again. Are you just going to stand there and watch? Kwa-a-a-a-a-a-a-a. Muyong spoke as he watched the enraged ogre roar. They were truly high-rank monsters. It was hard for him alone. However, if Sahun, the ruler of the ice Dakibus, helped him, he would be able to reduce the number of ogres more easily. It's not a power of an ice Dakibi. It's not like there aren't any Dakibus without exceptional power. Aren't those fire Dakibus using a strange power as well? There was no law that stated ice Dakibus could only use ice-type skills. Although it could make him a bit suspicious, using one would be fine. It would be a problem if he summoned the undead here as well, but using the specter's strength to momentarily restrain one's movements would be all that strange. What was more, the stamina of fire Dakibus were interconnected to prevent Arlo from becoming exhausted. However, Onhu looked at Myung gulped. It's the power of the spirits of the dead. Although they are vulgar, the strength itself. There were lots of Dakibus who could control spirits of the dead. However, there were only a handful of Dakibus who could freely control numerous spirits of the dead. And Sahun knew that at the end of that path was Azura. The and whom the Dakibus worshipped both meant Azura. There were only a handful of Dakibus who knew the past name, Azura. Sahun was one of them. They said that you could obtain the position of once you cleared the trial of but it was all part of a ceremony. You couldn't become the real And although it was only for a second, Myung's appearance seemed to be that of the real it was like seeing Azura's loyal vassal. No, that's not possible. It was an exaggeration. Sahun quickly shook his head. He must have been delusional since his mind was completely exhausted. Myung was simply controlling the specters. Okay. First, let's work together to stop the ogres. Sahun made a decision. Myung was much stronger than other Dakibus. Sahun felt he could win against 1 or 2 ogres if they worked together. Of course, Myung was weaker than himself, but the fact that he was an ice Dakibi was important. With a careless look, Myung started to talk. I will hold back the ogre. You slit its throat. Though, even if he was an ice Dakibi, he didn't seem to have an ounce of respect towards him. Sahun inwardly clicked his tongue. It wasn't time to quibble over such things now. Thump. 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 Enraged ogres were approaching. Swayash. A gap appeared in the air and a small fairy popped out. The fairy looked around before smiling brightly once she found someone high up in the sky and quickly moved towards her. Uni 1. Oh my, Wahi, you came. The fairy who suddenly appeared was Wahi. Wahi. I came to ask for a bit help in creating a trial. You didn't finish it yet. Well. It's hard to find the right balance, hey. Wahi, who was having a private conversation, looked down for a moment and was surprised. They are Dakibus. It was a trial requested by Azura in the first place. The time had come. There he is. Wahi. Wahi flew around chaotically and smiled slightly as she found a Dakibi. Is it because you found a Dakibi you know? Uni, I think I found my mate. You're not saying that a Dakibi is your mate, right? The fairy, who Wahi called Uni, wiggled her brow. Out of all beings, for a Dakibi to be a fairy's mate. It was something that just couldn't happen, but Wahi didn't seem to care and replied. It's true. Wahi, there are a lot of fairies who are interested in you. They are all just boring. They need to drink some more goat milk. And Mom told me to meet a strong guy who draws my attention. Mom? Ah, the fairy queen. Wahi was probably the only one who could call the fairy queen her mom. Originally, fairies didn't have parents. They were born from nature and were beings who lived for thousands of years. However, the fairy queen gave Wahi that kind of advice. When she thought of the fairy queen's personality, it was something that could happen, but even still, it was amazing. But, Wahi didn't care and just smiled. Wahi. He must have come to take Wahi, I'm certain of it. Just watch him. Since that guy is really strong. Wahi concentrated and watched the Dakibi. However, the Uni fairy couldn't accept it. Wasn't it the Dakibi who just wandered around corpses all this time? She never saw him fight. Wahi must be mistaken. She thought that even if that Dakibi fought, he wouldn't be all that strong. However, after the ogres appeared and she saw the black specters, she couldn't help but change her thoughts. Husband. Win. It wasn't odd to see Wahi leap up to cheer for him. The fight was that intense. There was something about him that made the palms of those who watched sweat. Boom. The ogre's body exploded. Even something like this was possible. Muyong nodded his head as he discovered something new about the specters. There would be an explosion when he gathered the specters together and made them crash into each other. He was able to physically damage them from afar. Gaya. Sahun kneeled onto one knee after hunting about half the ogres. His body became worn out after fighting on the front lines. It was admirable for him to last this long. Tap. Muyong kicked Sahun in the back. Get up. You bastard. If you stop, the rest of the ice Dakibus will die. The over 30,000 Dakibus were reduced to half before they knew it. The strength of the military would crumble when the general fell. Muyong hoped Sahun wouldn't die easily. It was because he concluded it was best for him to live and keep the balance between the fire Dakibus and the ice Dakibus than to die and be turned into an undead. Ga. At Muyong's threat, Sahun was barely able to stand back up. For the ice Dakibus, Sahun wasn't simply their leader but also their pillar of support. If Sahun fell, the ice Dakibus would instantly be annihilated. That was why Muyong urged and pushed Sahun further. Thanks to this, they were able to safely finish hunting the ogres. Muyong could only frown at the wave that appeared a while later. Dragon skeleton soldiers. They were literally soldiers made from dragon bones. To be exact, they were a type of undead, but even among the undead, they were especially tricky to create. The dragon skeleton soldiers were so unbelievably strong that there were even stories about how they were created to guard the rare highly intelligent dragon's dens. It was more so because they were able to nullify most physical and magical attacks. Skreek! Skreek! There were only 10 of them, but it was enough to overwhelm the more than 10,000 Dakibus. There was a good chance that the side whom the dragon skeleton soldiers decide to attack first would be destroyed. Everyone instinctively knew this, but the very first to move was none other than Muyong. We're at the crossroad. Here, the winner will be decided. The moment he thought that, his body instinctively moved. Swaya! Spectres flew around Muyong. Muyong grabbed one of them. 10 minutes was enough. Muyong didn't believe he could deal with 10 dragon skeleton soldiers by himself like an idiot. It was beyond reckless, it was foolish. But, he didn't take the lead without a plan. Muyong was planning on blocking the dragon skeleton soldiers and slightly adjusting their direction. Eek! You a piece of bone! Towards the fire Dakibus. Muyong's movements were so natural that no one felt his actions were deliberate. With everyone scared out of their wits due to the appearance of dragon skeleton soldiers, Arlo, the leader of the fire Dakibus, who didn't think that Muyong's actions were intentional, started to move. However, even Arlo couldn't fight against the dragon skeleton soldiers one-on-one. He was just holding on with his infinite stamina. How long can he last? Muyong watched the dragon skeleton soldier massacre the fire Dakibus as he focused on the two who were most likely Headley's cow. If one of the two was Headley's cow, it wouldn't just quietly watch the current situation. If the situation continued, it was obvious that it would end with the destruction of the fire Dakibus. That didn't mean that other Dakibus were in good situations themselves, but he meant that the ones who were most affected were the fire Dakibus. It would be hard for the Headley's cow to just sit back and watch. Headley's cow's goal was to defeat the trial of Hum. Muyong was at least certain of that. He was certain that it hit among the fire Dakibus as they were most likely to win. It would show some sort of reaction. And Muyong's prediction wasn't off. Swang! Of the two, one's movements changed. It stopped moving and the density of its muscles started to change. Eventually, it changed its shape and changed into something like a Duoxini. Other Dakibus might see this and think he could have evolved while fighting, but Muyong was certain. It wasn't like an evolution. It was very different from something as refined as that. I found it. Muyong's puckered his lips. It turned into a Duoxini to overcome danger, but that became the deciding factor. That one. The fairy who could freely change its shape. Headley's cow. He finally found it. Chapter 68, Second Class, 4. TL, Yoni. Edited, Yoni, Myanai. What is it after? However, it didn't seem to be after something right now. And it also didn't seem like Headley's cow was suspicious of Myung. That was why Myung wanted to know what Headley's cow was truly after. An opportunity would come the moment it obtained its goal. Anyone would let their guard down when they achieved their goal. He was satisfied that he had determined which one was Headley's cow. A Duoxini. And Hum are protecting us, the fire Dakibus. On the other hand, it was like a once-in-a-lifetime event for all the Dakibus. Evolution, it was incredibly difficult to overcome one's limits. It was only possible when they overcame the impossible. And because one of the fire Dakibus evolved, he could understand why they were making a big commotion. On the other hand, Arlo, who used to be the only fire Duoxini, stiffened. Perhaps it was because he thought that his domain would be invaded? The fighting spirit of the ice Dakibus died off while the fighting spirit of the fire Dakibus instantly peaked. They started to counterattack as they were finally free from being indiscriminately massacred by the dragon skeleton soldiers. Dragon bones. However, Myung, who now knew which Dakibi was Headley's cow, turned his gaze towards the dragon skeleton soldiers. Materials needed to create dragon skeleton soldiers. Dragon bones. Though dragon skeleton soldiers who were completely created from dragon bones were considered special, these dragon skeleton soldiers didn't seem all that strong. Still, about 50% of their makeup should be dragon bones. Dragon bones were one of the few materials that were considerably hard to find. They will become the foundation when creating my equipment. From winning the free-for-all battle, Myung had earned a piece of the earth dragon's skin. And if he added things like dragon bones and a heart of a phoenix, he would be able to produce an equipment stronger than he originally thought. Myung's eyes lit up. If he built equipment with dragon bones as their foundation. Since the dragon skeleton soldiers were in a similar state as undead, the art of death skill wouldn't work. On the other hand, that meant that he could just collect the dragon skeleton soldiers. While the fire Dakibi evolved and the Dakibus focused on hunting the dragon skeleton soldiers, Myung acted as if he was helping them as he collected the corpse of dead dragon skeleton soldiers. Asterisk. People normally called giants who lived in snowy regions, Yetis. However, cursed Yetis were much stronger than normal Yetis. They were almost completely immune to all kinds of curses and holy spells. In fact, there were no monsters he could cast the art of death skill on after the 30th wave. Myung, we can't just lose our spirit to the fire Dakibus. Sehun approached Myung with a serious expression on his face. Although Myung was collaborating with them as a group, Sehun knew that Myung wasn't showing his true intentions. That was why Sehun asked him for help for the first time. I think the table has already turned. That's why we need to try harder. And the newly appeared Duoxini. I feel uneasy for some reason. Myung was secretly surprised. He thought that all the Dakibus were cheering for the new Duoxini, but it seemed like Sehun found something odd about him. If this was truly an evolution, it would have been a miracle for it to occur in a battlefield, but that wasn't the case. Headley's cow just changed its appearance to simply hide its real intentions. Myung spoke as he nodded his head. To try harder. I will try that. As they would earn a better reward the more waves they cleared. There wasn't anything to lose by advancing to higher levels. He had already saved up enough strength by making a few thousand specters and a number close to 1,000 undead. Right then, someone approached him from behind. When he turned around, he saw Jaeon standing awkwardly. I'm sorry. For not knowing my place. It was Jaeon. The king of the Freezing Land tribe. He tried his best to express how truly sorry he was. He could only act this way. Because it was Jaeon who pestered Myung to fight, or to at least pretend to fight, even if he was a weak chief priest. However, after the appearance of ogres, this perception was completely shattered. For Myung to be able to stand alongside Sehun and fight. The shock rushed in like a storm. It wasn't simply Jaeon who felt this way. It was same for the Dakibus who laughed at Myung for being a coward. They weren't able to recognize the strong and was busy looking down on him. Their faces reddened from embarrassment. From the fire Dakibus side, a new Duoxini appeared. And from the ice Dakibus side, Muyong was the only one who was able to do anything. Anyone could see that Sahun was at his limit. The coward had suddenly become their best rising star. I don't care. If anything, Muyong was actually glad that he was ignored. Thanks to that, he was able to easily collect the specters and the undead. Muyong took out a talisman. As he shook the talisman, a red helmet and cape appeared. The lunatic sovereign's set. He didn't wear it until now to pretend to be a Dakibi. However, since it wasn't like the Dakibus didn't have equipment as they weren't especially suspicious of his use of specters, he thought that it wouldn't matter if he wore his equipment or not. From now on, it seemed okay to draw a moderate amount of attention. On the other hand, Sahun frowned. You look like a fire Dakibi. Don't worry. I won't be siding with them. He wasn't planning on even stepping a single foot on the fire Dakibus side until Headley's cow showed its true motive. Muyong spoke to Sahun as he stepped forward. Let's go. He fought sincerely. He kept the balance and pressured Headley's cow to overwork itself. He's like a red demon. Who is it? You know that guy. The one who didn't fight and prayed. Ha! Did he deliberately save his strength? Few gazes were focused on Muyong. Muyong's fight was that overwhelming. He moved faster than anyone else and was more specialized in fighting more than anyone else. It was true. If they only considered the number of battlefields one stepped on, there would be no one who exceeded Muyong in the entire underworld. He was solely making up for his lacking stats with his experience. It's the effect of increasing the conquest rate of Azura Path. Muyong sensed a madness growing inside him. Even Muyong, who had incredible self-discipline, was affected by it. If it was someone else, they would have already been consumed by the madness. As they finished off the last cured Yeti, the above message appeared. Jingle! Jingle! A shadow monster with a huge iron ball tied to its feet appeared from the ground below. The Dakibus who saw this couldn't help but make a gloomy expression. For even a subterranean monster to appear. The trial of whom is too cruel. Although more than 30,000 Dakibus entered, less than 5,000 were left. And everyone realized that this was the final wave. The fire Dakibus still had the upper hand, but if they were annihilated here, everyone would be defeated. Closh! The iron ball tied to its feet became larger and swept its surroundings. The iron ball destroyed everything it touched. Neither the Dakibus or the Duoxinis could gather the courage to go near it. It was best to move using the corpses as their shield. Instantly, about 1,000 Dakibus vanished. What are you gonna do? Meanwhile, Muyong was watching Headley's cow. Shadow monsters were near the top of the high-ranked monsters, and they were even comparable to most top-ranked monsters. Even if they all attacked at once, they wouldn't do much. It would be the same if Muyong used all of his undead. That meant this was their limit. As if Headley's cow felt the same way, it showed a change in its attitude. After discussing with Arlo, the Duoxini, it looked at the ice Dakibus including Sahun. Muyong, prepare yourself. A battle is going to commence. The fire Dakibus changed their mind. And Sahun, who saw this, ground his teeth. In the end, it was a battle. They made a promise to have a fair fight, but Arlo had broken it. As they believed they were unable to win against the shadow criminal, they decided to use the ice Dakibus as their sacrifice. However, Sahun wasn't the type to just stand there and suffer for them. Ice Dakibus! Raise your weapons! A battle commenced. Both sides were desperate. They fought a fight for their survival in which they couldn't withdraw. And Muyong slowly took out a talisman he hid. Get up! About 1,000 undead suddenly surged forth. Swoosh! Swoosh! Dakibus, orc lords and even ogres. It was a small army of undead. Since he made them quickly, their total stats were greatly decreased, but it was enough to pressure them. The corpses got up. Now what? While the Dakibas were confused, Muyong only looked at Headley's cow. Go after him. Currently, the number of fire Dakibas who were protecting Headley's cow was greatly reduced. Now, when they weren't able to escape the endless battlefield, was the best chance to catch it. And Headley's cow clenched its teeth after realizing that every undead was after it. Soon after, Headley's cow changed its appearance. Wyvern. Muyong chuckled out loud. Wyverns were known as the kings of the sky. It was trying to stall as much time as it could in air. It wasn't a bad decision, but Muyong had few thousands of specters. Few thousands of specters popped out of Muyong's body. Do I need to just kill that wyvern? Of course, the Murloc king, Murdyudun, was included. Muyong shook his head. Tie him up. So that it can't fly. I understand. As Murdyudun ordered the specters, they moved in an orderly fashion and held both wings of the wyvern. The wyvern could only crawl on the ground as the poisoned shadows poisoned it, and the rest of the specters held it down. It then changed into an ogre to resist them, but it still didn't work against them. Rai'eab. And the moment Muyong had waited for came. The ogre's body ripped apart and a huge fiery bird appeared from inside it. Screech. Phoenix. What in the world is going on right now? It instantly burned everything around it as it came out. Even the specters couldn't withstand the flames of a phoenix easily. However, they didn't drop immediately. They were stopping it from flying. Using this time, Muyong ordered all the undead to grab hold of the phoenix. I'm almost there. The phoenix was a top-ranked monster. Among them, it was a unique monster that they called Mirage. You could never catch a phoenix by fighting with it normally. However, the phoenix was the last resort for Headley's cow. After fighting all this time, it was exhausted and was only focused on running away. A little more. It seemed like he could achieve his goal after a bit more. At least, the blazing spear soldier with his high fire resistance held his spear and approached the phoenix to pierce its throat. It was at that moment. Blaze. A violent flame poured out for the mouth of the phoenix. Breath. The holy flame that burned everything. He never thought the phoenix could even use breath. It was because he didn't have any information on Mirage rank monsters. All the monsters around it, including the specters, burned and the phoenix flapped its wings. Muyong dashed forward. He climbed on top of its back and held Anguish in his hand. It was a very dangerous action. Stab. As he stabbed Anguish into the phoenix started to fly at an incredible speed. All Muyong could do was hold on. He tried to hold on as long as he could. Meanwhile, on the ground, the number of Dakibas were quickly decreasing. Token of A shining marble slowly came down from the sky. The phoenix quickly flew and snatched it away. From the beginning, this was what Headley's cow was after. Zop. At the same time, the world shattered. Instantly, the surrounding environment changed. He had returned to the Soul Mountains. Damn it! Muyong clenched his teeth. He was successful in grabbing onto the phoenix's body, but the next part was the problem. The flames he felt on his back were hot. His skin was slowly melting. His bones were visible and his consciousness was drifting away. He completely believed he could capture Headley's cow, who turned into a phoenix. Was it recklessness? What, this much preparation not enough? Rumble. Ruumble. When Muyong was grieving, the sky suddenly became dark. From the sky, black lightning fell. Windy rain fell and suppressed the fire of the phoenix. When he turned his head to look at the strange phenomenon, a black horse with a horn was comfortably running next to the phoenix. The figure seemed completely relaxed, as if it had come out for a walk. Chapter 69. The hell horse that hadn't appeared for a while had suddenly appeared like the wind. That was why Muyong had no choice but to plan to catch Headley's cow himself. The hell horse was slightly dejected as well, but regardless, this was the golden opportunity to make Muyong use one of his 3 favors. Muyong didn't have the time to think about it any longer. Kill it, he specifically told him. As there was a huge difference between capturing it and killing it. The hell horse snorted out loud. Hiss! And breathed out violently. As if trying to convince Muyong to trust it, it showcased its confidence by shaking its horn left and right. Muyong pulled out anguish that was pierced in Headley's cow. And slowly jumped off. Then, a few thousand specters appeared and formed a cloud below him to reduce his falling speed. Muyong looked up to the sky after landing on the ground. You must succeed. Muyong clenched his teeth. If he failed here, he needed to make significant changes to his plans. However, the hell horse was still very composed, as if it was out for a picnic. It slowly came to Headley's cow's side, and as if teasing it, ran around Headley's cows in a circle, slowly changing the direction Headley's cow was flying towards. Clash! Black lightning struck down onto the hell horse's horn. The horn started to shine and a black barrier formed around it. Headley's cow was confined inside the barrier, the phoenix couldn't even flap its wing with ease. As if gravity had become stronger, its speed sharply fell and dropped towards the ground. Nay! At the same time, a massive amount of magic was beginning to form on top of the hell horse's horn. A black sphere was created and lightning continued to strike it. Zap! Zayop! The enormous integration of strength was enough to make those who watched shudder. As the hell horse shook its horn again, the sphere became bigger to about 1 m in diameter and quickly flew towards Headley's cow. Clash! An incredible explosion sounded in the air, and at the same time the darkness swallowed Headley's cow. The moment the sphere touched Headley's cow, the sphere darkened the area a few hundred meters all around it. Muyong lifted his hand to protect his face. The wind created from the explosion passed by, wiping out the surrounding trees. However, he didn't stop observing the direction the phoenix was at. Afterwards, Headley's cow slowly dropped to the ground. The durability of phoenix was so unbelievably high, it was able to protect its body even from an explosion this big. However, the flame around its entire body was greatly weakened. It used too much strength to protect itself. Nay! It seemed like the hell horse was also quite surprised. As if it didn't expect the phoenix to survive the attack. However, it didn't attack any further. Instead, the hell horse looked at Muyong. You're saying it's a service? Muyong couldn't help but chuckle out loud. I will let you end its life. In return, you can't change your mind. The hell horse's eyes seemed to express these words. And for Muyong, it was an advantage for him to end the phoenix's life himself. Originally, he told the hell horse to kill it, but if he thought of the achievement and the reward, this was more advantageous. Muyong moved as he tightly held anguish. He walked towards where the phoenix had landed and he looked at the scene for a moment. An enormous bird was breathing heavily as it was lying on the ground. Kick! It cried pitifully and looked at him hoping for sympathy, but Muyong's expression was the same. Swoosh! He lifted anguish and aimed directly at the neck of the phoenix. It's the end. Swoosh! The head the size of an arm was cut off. Then, the flames that covered its entire body was died down. He couldn't feel any signs of life from it. Muyong sliced its body and took out the heart covered in flames. The heart of a phoenix. Shortly, the Eye of the Sky skill activated and it told Muyong detailed information about it. Heart of the Phoenix, the heart that gives the phoenix, a monster recognized as a mirage, infinite power. It is said that its heart is covered in holy flames and will not allow any foreign substances to enter it. You could even say that the rarity and the quality of the material are top class and equipment made from it wouldn't be any lower than master rank. Asterisk: if you consume it, your intelligence and wisdom will drastically increase. Resistance to fire will also drastically increase. If the word drastically was added, normally it meant it would increase by 10-20. There was a way to consume it, but Muyong inwardly shook his head. From the beginning, he was planning on making an equipment using the heart of the phoenix. Muyeong placed the heart inside his infinite pouch. The body of the phoenix that had lost its heart wasn't really useful. It was because all its power came from this heart. In reality, after the phoenix lost its heart, its body shrunk and withered. Neg. The hell horse came down beside him. In an imposing posture, it solemnly went around the phoenix. Muyeong clicked his tongue as he saw this. It wants me to compliment it. He could clearly see its intentions. It was a gesture from Muyeong to compliment it after watching its performance. Certainly, the hell horse's performance was beyond what Muyeong had imagined. The power that instantly overwhelmed the phoenix. It seemed worthy of a master of darkness to boast about his favorite horse. Thank you. You were amazing. The hell horse held its head even higher. You could say it was a very predictable horse. The plan itself had ended, but not everything was complete. The trial of Token of From the inside of the phoenix's mouth, he took out a marble. Half of a marble. There were 2 trials of The Dakibi who completed the other trial would receive the other half. And he was able to momentarily confirm that their trial had already ended when he was in the air. Muyeong took a deep breath and walked back. And, the hell horse stood beside him. As if it still wanted him to continuously marvel at its dignity. The Dakibus were stirred up. 2 trials of were arranged. Among the 30,000 Dakibus that went through the endless battlefield, only a number a bit over 300 were able to come out alive. On the other hand, the other trial had over 20,000 Dakibus still alive from the trial. Instead, they had bunched up together. They were completely different from the Ice Dakibus and Fire Dakibus who were divided and had fought against each other. Where is the other half of the token? Suhun knitted his brows. He was successful in killing the Fire Dakibi Arlo, but now the Gold Dakibus were the problem. The Gold Dakibus used the energy of the ground to exhibit their power, and it seemed like they were the final winners of the trial. Also, only 300 were alive on their side. On the other hand, the leader of Gold Dakibus led 20,000 Dakibus. There is no point in fighting, so just quietly hand it to me. This type of meaning seemed to be implied. It was clear who the winner was. But, Suhun didn't have the token. There it is. Suhun lifted his hand and pointed to the sky. Skreek. The phoenix screamed out loud. Zap. Zayop. Lightning struck down and the hell horse was running beside it. The scene unfolded that resembled the creation of the world. Although it was one-sided, it was overwhelming. Even the fire tars wouldn't be able to produce that much firepower. Maybe it would be possible for the dragon race. Yes, just the dragon race. However, even in the great underworld, the number of dragons were extremely small. Why was the phoenix in our trial? I'm not sure. It wasn't a phoenix in the beginning. It all of a sudden changed to one. What kind of ludicrous statement is this? Everything is true. Suhun was frustrated. Suhun didn't know what was happening right now. One thing was certain, that the phoenix snatched the token and Muyeong chased after it. Muyeong. That was right. Muyeong was also a Dakibi masked under a veil. Was he really an ice Dakibi? Clayosh. Then a huge explosion occurred in the air. The ground strongly shook. This kind of power. Shouldn't we go after the phoenix even now? A phoenix and a monster almost as strong as a dragon. Is it even possible to block those 2 and take back the token? The Dakibus were extremely confused. It was completely unexpected for someone else to barge in the Dakibus trial. After some time had passed, someone approached from afar. He instantly passed by Suhun and spoke towards the rest of the group. Where is the other half of the token? Suhun felt awfully refreshed at this. It was like returning the words the ruler of the Gold Dakibus had just asked him. He had the other half of the marble. Token of You had it. The man, Muyeong carelessly spoke as he looked at the ruler of the Gold Dakibus. It was an arrogant thing to do. However, no one could react to him. Stomp! Stomp! Footsteps that were unusually loud. Then, the thing that stood by Muyong was a monster everyone knew of. The hell horse. He still had his head straight up as it approached Muyong and stood by him. No way, the one who tamed the monster. An alarm rang inside Sahun's head. The hell horse as strong as a dragon. And most dragons were holy and were so prideful that they would normally live alone. Not even demon kings or demon gods were able to tame them easily. But he was able to tame a monster comparable to dragons? Sahun wasn't the only one who was surprised. Sahun was only a bit less surprised than others as he knew a bit about Muyong beforehand, or else he would have been completely surprised like the other Dakibas. His assumptions were correct. Give it to me. Muyong quietly stretched his hand. He was planning to grab hold of that token even if he had to ask a favor from the hell horse again. The expression of the ruler of the gold Dakiba stiffened and slowly handed the marble over as he understood the situation he was in. If he didn't see the hell horse frantically run around, they might have fought bravely, but everyone was already overwhelmed by its presence. They didn't call it a top-rank monster for nothing. In the underworld, the absolute strong won against the numerous. Although there were only a very few top-rank monsters, they possessed earth-shattering powers. The gap between a high rank and a top rank were beyond one's imagination. If he wanted to protect the 20,000 Dakibas left, he had no other choice. Muyong instantly placed the two half marbles together. Swoosh! The marble started to emit light. The light only emitted towards Muyong and was slowly being absorbed into him. Amazing! He exceeded our expectations. He used the hell horse, but that's also his power. We need to choose a reward for achieving the impossible. Humph! I have my eyes on him. He's suitable to create our secret garden. I won't allow you to give him an ambiguous reward. The secret garden. I still can't trust him. There are many with abilities like him. What should we give him? Who will step forth? I will. I think he has the qualification to take over my will. King Slayer? Didn't you already step forth before? Above all, doesn't he already have a class? There are still a lot of spots left in his soul. It seems like he can have 2 or 3 more. If you are planning on raising him, you have to think carefully of the combination. Death Lord wasn't enough and now King Slayer, their levels of difficulty are both too high. There is still a long way ahead if we want to achieve the final victory. I think differently. It's obvious what people might do if they receive a power that is easily achieved. We need someone who will keep going without rest for a long time. It seemed like everyone agreed about that part. If he walked the difficult and troublesome road, he would gain that much strength and experience. And the fruits he would reap when he reached close to the end of the road would be great. Afterwards, the Masters of Darkness finished their evaluation. 8 approved and 3 declined. As they completed their decision, the surrounding was stained with darkness. It meant that the meeting had concluded. Now, all that was left was his decision. Chapter 70. Muyong knitted his eyebrows. The Masters of Darkness. The Guardians of the Law made up of a total of 11 people. Previously, he was able to hear about their existence through Merlin when he was at the Blue Temple. And when Death Lord chose Muyong, he was able to feel his great presence. Through him, Muyong was able to gain a more advanced necromancer-type class. This time, it's King Slayer. However, all he knew was the name, he would only check what kind of class it was after he accepts it. Of course, it was the same for King Slayer. Lord class. From the name, he presumed it had something to do with kings. There is a difference this time. Muyong quietly laughed. Death Lord was a class he was basically forced to get. He received it without being able to dispute the decision. On the other hand, this time, they were waiting for Muyong's reply. In the past, he even gave Muyong his hell horse as a present. Was there a difference in personality between the two masters of darkness? After experiencing the Death Lord class, there is a definite advantage to receiving Lord classes. It could be worth even adjusting his original plans. He was planning on obtaining secret classes to strike a balance, but even if they were similar classes, he could dare say that Lord classes were the best. Even for the Death Lord class, it was on a different level compared necromancers and corpse sorcerers. That meant it would be the same for the Kingslayer class. I will accept. Myung made his decision. Whatever it was, as long as it was beneficial, it would produce great effects. He saw it as a truly worthwhile challenge if it was like this. Afterwards, messages slowly appeared in front of his eyes. At the same time, his vision flipped and a man reflected in his eyes. The Medo era where magicians dominated and knights died. The man was a genuine knight. He was able to reach the pinnacle of his swordsmanship by honing it through his own experience. While everyone got on tanks to participate in the battlefield, the man trusted in only his sword and slashed at necks of his enemies. The last imperial knight of the empire. Not even the magicians who could use supernatural powers were his match. He surpassed human limits and had finally grasped the pinnacle of power a human could possess. Then, the emperor drove him towards a dangerous battlefield. A Sporn battle? The extermination of the gold dragon, Alexia? He completed them all by himself. He's not human. How can a human perform all these things by himself? People joked about him. That he wasn't a human. However, those words weren't a joke to a few people. They felt their lives could be at risk and excluded the man they were also jealous of. Nonetheless, the man stood firm and completed his role, but countless misunderstandings and feelings of jealousy resulted in a catastrophe. The man wasn't a nuisance only to the emperor. All the kings in the world wanted him dead. High-rank magicians were gathered and huge tanks surrounded him. Majesty! Why would you start something like this? You are too strong. Too dangerous. To accomplish great deeds with the strength of a human. In all honesty, I never thought you two could complete them. Are you saying you truly don't believe in my loyalty? If you truly want to be loyal, kill yourself here. The man wailed loudly. He continuously partook in battles that were deemed impossible and brought back victory even while injuring himself. All because they were orders of the emperor. However, this wasn't right. His malice, their dark emotions, contaminated the man. All right. If you want me to become a devil, then I will gladly do it. That moment, the man shed himself of his human nature. Evil, he became evil itself and assassinated all the kings who took part in trying to kill him. Afterwards, he wanted to make the world free from ostracism, but everyone became filled with delusions and suspicions. People could no longer trust each other and were walking towards destruction. In the end, when the world was on the brink of ruin, the man walked the wastelands alone. The man was tired. I have failed. Then he slowly lifted his head and looked at Myung. He clearly spoke towards Myung's direction. Can you handle this strength? Everyone will exclude you. Everyone will want you dead. Will you be able to overcome that? Lastly, he spoke with his fists tightly clenched. Will you not fail? What could be defined as a failure? He was probably asking if he could accept all these trials. Myung replied. I'm not you. However, as if that didn't seem enough, he added a few words. I will not be beaten. He killed countless heroes. He burned down people's hopes and dreams and received the blames of everyone. Even then, Myung wasn't beaten. He never regretted the decisions he made. Instead, he smiled and faced them. Alternatively, the Kingslayer was too upright. He was a man who stood completely opposite of Myung. Then, take it. I will leave my secret garden to you. Kingslayer smiled. Then, twilight fell and covered the world in darkness. Asterisk. A bright light was endlessly swallowing Myung. Muyong's body was slowly lifted up in the air, and in time all the light was absorbed inside Muyong's body. Only then did Muyong open his eyes. Greetings, Greetings, The Dakibus bowed. The true ruler of Dakibus. It was because he had the qualifications. However, all the Dakibus were in a state of confusion. There were no records of a Dakibi who hadn't evolved into a Duoxini becoming the It was said that the token of would reject them. But, without any rejection and as if it wanted Muyong, it acknowledged him. Since the token had acknowledged him, the Dakibus simply followed. Muyong looked around. Over 20,000 Dakibus bowed their bodies to welcome him. Status Viewer. To check his changes, Muyong turned the status viewer to show his status. Achievement Effect. A+, Strength +10. Ruler of Dakibus. Gremaris Anguish, A, +3 to all abilities. Azura's Vassal, A, the strength to deal with spirits and devil's power, spirit ability increased by 10. Soulmate, B+, from now on, if you commune with an undead, the undead's stats will slightly increase permanently. Descendant of Murlocs, B+, increased growth of Murlocs. Fairy's Blessing, B, allows fairies to feel familiar with the user. Class Effect. Death Lord, Lord Class, Ruler of Death. Kingslayer, Lord Class, Slaughterer of Kings. Stats. Strength 140, 104 plus 36, Agility 137, 100 plus 37. Stamina 124, 96 plus 28, Intelligence 81, 59 plus 22. Wisdom 77, 55 plus 22, Fighting Aura 81, 59 plus 22. Magic Resistance 65, 47 plus 18, Spirit Ability 61, 33 plus 28. Special note, Fighting Aura has been awakened. Completed the first metamorphosis. Equipped and invoked equipment, Anguish, Strength plus 14, Ogre's Cruelty, Lunatic Sovereign's Set, all stats plus 15, Stamina plus 10, Shadow Armor, it allows you to teleport to a shadow within your vision 3 times a day, Wicked Belt, Intelligence and Wisdom plus 4, all undead are strengthened by 5%, and Hermes's Boots, Agility plus 15, 3 seconds of acceleration. He became the next and a class was added. Besides that, his stats had greatly increased. The first metamorphosis isn't too far from now. Muyong wasn't sure if he would experience the metamorphosis again since he had already completed it, but he would know when the time came. Anyways, if he received a class, then the skill regarding it would have been added as well. Muyong checked his new skills. Skill title, King Slaughterer, none. Description: the authority to kill any king. You become stronger as you act upon your authority. Every time you kill someone recognized as a king, you will earn appropriate stats. You will not be swayed by servants. Skill title, Swordmaster, F. Description: the one who walks the path of a sword. A unique power only given to the Kingslayer who has surpassed everything, honing his sword skills. Asterisk: understanding of sword drastically increased. Asterisk: you can find out about a sword's hidden story. Asterisk: it pulls out the pure performance of a sword. There were 2. And both skills were passive and didn't need to be activated. Satisfied, Muyong nodded his head. I won't fail. And he resolved himself once more. Kingslayer. That he will walk a path completely different from him. Congratulations for completing the 32nd wave of the battlefield. Wahee. Crackle. Crackle. Out of the blue, fireworks fired off and beside him, a small fairy appeared. It was a fairy he had seen before. It was Wahee, whom he saw before in the endless battlefield. Why are you here? Why you're saying this because you're embarrassed, right? I know. But, you don't need to. I don't understand what you're saying. I promised you will get Wuhi if you clear more than 30 waves in the endless battlefield. I never made that kind of promise. He did hear about it, but he didn't make a promise. As Muyong spoke coldly, Wuhi was about to cry. Sniff, this is what others mean when they say tossed away after being used. Wuhu is being tossed away. Stop speaking nonsense. Then are you going to have Wuhi? Muyong frowned. On the other hand, the Dakibas who were watching them could only widen their eyes. Was the prophecy really true? A small commotion started. The trial of whom? A prophecy about the token of The high priest read the secrets of the universe and spoke that everything will be accomplished here, in the Soul Mountains. And within the prophecy, there was a part that stated, the one the fairy follows. He will lead us to paradise. However, it was hard to even come across a fairy. And they haven't really heard of a fairy following someone. Be quiet. It was all too complicated. In an instant, at Muyong's words, they were silent. You couldn't say he wasn't an incredible influence and, soon, Suhun was the first to act. Dear please lead us to paradise. Paradise? What kind of nonsense was this? However, Suhun was serious. The ruler of the Ice Dakibas, the one who spoke informally all this time, spoke politely to him. What was more, he was even sincere. They said if the real showed up, he will lead the Dakibas to paradise. Us, the Dakibas, all have been divided, and in this extreme land, we were barely able to prolong our lives. Please, lead us. The Dakibas were never strong monsters. To the point, it was almost impossible for them to live in this demon god's territory. Muyong breathed out a long breath. If you want to follow me, then you can. Muyong continued to speak to the 20,000 Dakibas. However, I won't guarantee the place I'm going to is paradise. There is nothing there and everything is starting from the ground up. A place where there was a little less than 100 people. Muyong was planning to take the Dakibas to his territory. He wasn't sure if humans and Dakibas could live peacefully together, but while they had the influential person known as Muyong, it didn't seem like it would turn into a fight. Muyong looked at Wuhi and spoke again. You make your decision. I want to go. I want to go. Wuhi raised her hand high in the air. A decision she didn't think twice about. That was right, a decision had to be made. If he forcefully took them, they would only resist. Muyong moved. Soon, 20,000 Dakibas of various types started to follow behind him.